Hey everyone, welcome to episode 24. Today's guest is Xenia Viray. In this episode, Xenia talks about appreciating the imagination, co-regulating with the earth, and the heart as a place of metabolism and energy activism. Before I continue, I just want to say again that I'm recording the intros wherever I can, whenever I can, and right now I was able to get a private study room in the library, but there's still some background noises from the other study room, so I'm sorry about that, but this is the best place I could find to record the intros, so thanks for bearing with me, thanks for your patience. I hope you still enjoy this intro. I know it's been some time since episode 23 with Jeff Hinshaw. If you haven't listened to that episode, I really encourage you to check it out. And any episodes you haven't listened to, especially ones that at first might not seem interesting to you, because I'm telling you, there are gems in each episode. I've been in the Florida Keys for nearly 3 months now, still adjusting to my new life and schedule here. I really wanted to publish new episodes every Friday, but I'm moving at a slower pace, so check back periodically on the podcast's Substack, Spotify, YouTube, and Instagram pages for updates. At some point, I hope to get back to the episode every Friday flow. In the meantime, just check back. Also, please pass the podcast along to anyone you think may be interested. All right, let's get into this episode. I've been following Xenia's work for a while, always intrigued and challenged to think and feel differently by what she shares. Last fall, I participated in her offering Create Your Cosmology, also known as CYC, because over the last 8 years, I've been exploring my own framework, worldview, and personal cosmology that I'm co-creating. When I tell people about it on Instagram and in my newsletters, I say I'm living, traveling, and dreaming in the or a aquatic universe. I've been doing this for years. And so I'm slowly working with Xenia's offering Create Your Cosmology to help me to continue building out how I'm conceiving and perceiving my life and life in general. If I'm correct, Xenia is currently facilitating the 3rd cohort of CYC, and that is pretty cool. As I say at the beginning of the episode, it was a true honor to interview Xenia, who I feel is one of the leading voices of our time. Here is her bio. Xenia is an imagination activator, frequency artist, and heart healer. Through the frequency of who she is, she calls forward developing and dormant energies within you. As they rise, so do the hidden reasons you hid or deactivated these energies. On her About Myths of Creation page on her website, she says, "In our work together, we hold deep compassion for the parts of you who felt they had to hide, and the emergent genius within who is aching to create. By staying in the frequency of the heart, we transmute and weave all aspects of you into a coherent whole with growing clarity on your unique energy and creative purpose." Xenia is a translator and synthesizer for the Multidimensional Pioneer. Those who are anchoring new frequencies and ideas into the tangible world, but are dedicated to staying present, grounded, and in reverent embrace of what it means to be human and alive on this earth. Xenia is also an artist whose main mediums are ideas, connections, experiences, and communities. These may come in the form of workshops, recordings, words, or a new way of seeing the world. She is still discovering more of what is possible when our potential meets the present moment. Her philosophy is that all languages, mediums, and forms of study both clarify and obfuscate. I can't say that word. Obfuscate. That with each revelation, there is a clearer picture of that which we do not know. For her, science, mysticism, mythology, and philosophy are all forms of inquiry that give us a picture of the strange, fractal-like wisdom woven into the fabric of our reality, as well as frameworks that elucidate the shape and presence of the unknowable and the mysterious. She works well with people who are curious about the nature of reality, who they are, who other people are, why they are here, and how it all fits together. You can read the rest of Xenia's bio on her website. It will be linked in the show notes. Some reflections from this episode. I asked Xenia about her experiences interfacing with information that contains different worldviews, perspectives, opinions, etc., and what it's like synthesizing so much information and so much different information. You got to listen to the episode to hear what she says. I asked this question because, and I'm about to free stream, I grew up really religious. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with growing up religious. I think that what I'm about to say, it's not so much about commentary and critique on a specific religion. It's more trying to tell people my story of being born in a belief system. When you're born in a belief system that's reaffirmed year after year after year, and then you have like 20 plus years of hearing the same way of thinking and believing and understanding the world, yourself, and others, it creates these mental, psychological structures in your mind, but literally in your brain. And in my experience, I was always taught not to leave church, not to walk out that door out into the world where I would be exposed to all sorts of stuff. And in my late teens, early 20s, you know what I did? I walked out that door. And I actually was very religious growing up. I actually got this tattoo on my right wrist. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. To remind myself not to leave church and not to walk through that door, because from what I was being taught, walking through that door would mean that I would go to hell, or that I would be walking into the embrace of sin, and that I would lose myself to the world. And I just think this doorway metaphor is very interesting, because I'm re-recording this intro because I had lots of issues, but when I first recorded this, I was like, I 1,000,000% understand why my family, friends, why a person's family, friends, partners, pastor, community, why they would say, don't you go through that door. Don't you go through that door. I can understand, especially now that I've walked through the door and it's been decades plus. I can understand why someone would say that, because when you walk through that door, you do get exposed to different types of worldviews, beliefs, ways of thinking, ways of living. And if you've been taught to understand the world a certain way, and your beliefs have been shaped, that can really be a shock to encounter people who have different religious beliefs, to people who think very differently from you, to people who live very differently from you. And but it's also like it's also that doorway is just very interesting because it's about protecting yourself and maintaining a relationship with your belief system. But on the other side of that door, well, I should speak for myself. I've learned some things that I was taught aren't true. I've learned that there's a fuller picture, a fuller story. I've learned that something that I grew up in that is fiercely taught in someone else's world, they could be like, how could you believe that? The people in my line believe XYZ for generations. This other person, their line believes something else. You have whole ancestral lines. You have completely different ways of understanding and viewing the world. One of the biggest things that I think a lot about, or that I want to bring up, is like sometimes I don't think people realize, they think, I've said this in another episode, people think that they are the way they are just because, and it's like you have to think about the family you were born into and how you were raised and how you were shaped and what beliefs you've inherited. And I think I grew up in a really dogmatic denomination where you're not allowed to ask questions, you're not allowed to be curious, shame-filled sermons and sexism, like all sorts of things. And so I think walking through that door is like, yeah, you need to be aware of what you're going to be exposed to, but also walking through that door could free you. You can also evolve when you walk through that door. You can grow. But I think it's very important to understand that when you're when you're venturing out into the wild, because venturing out into the wild, it's not a matter of if you'll encounter something that's different from you, you will. Or at least that's my experience, because I know for some people that maybe in their lives, because of the way it is, they might never run into anyone who thinks differently than them or who lives differently than them. So anyway, circling back to this first reflection, I wanted to ask Xenia about her experiences interfacing with information that contains different worldviews, perspectives, opinions, because it's like, what does happen to you when you're exposed to so many ways of thinking, understanding yourself, other people, how you relate, the earth, like what happens, And in my own experience, I'm in a place where I go back and forth with like, okay, that's real, it's not real. It's real, it's not real. And at first that used to freak me out. That used to really disturb me. But now I'm at a point where, I understand that people think and believe differently, and I'm just like, wow, you think that, or wow, you believe that. I don't agree with that, or wow, I found my people, Hopefully that made sense. That's my free stream for you. My second reflection is we talk about encountering people who are from/live in different realities, dimensions, worlds. So it kind of continues, it's connected to my last reflection. And we go on to talk about the heart. In my own personal life, again, after meeting vastly different people all my life, like many, my heart has been through surprise, shock, and basically put through the ringer as far as God, source, the stars, the universe, showing me all the different kinds of human beings who exist and what they are interested in and what they believe. My life is like God or the stars saying, "Hey, Simone. Hey," enter one of my other names. "I want to show you something." I hope this makes sense. My final reflection, what we didn't get to. So there were 3 questions I didn't get a chance to ask. One of them was I wanted to ask Xenia about the comet that's been called 3i Atlas and her upcoming offering Interstellar. I was going to read the workshop description, but I'm recording on my phone right now. I tried to record on my computer. It was this whole thing. But I really encourage you to check out her upcoming workshop, Interstellar. It's on October 30th. So it's coming up very soon, where participants get to explore this interstellar visitor coming in contact with our solar system and our planetary consciousness. And it sounds like, if I'm right, this comet's been traveling millions of years. Of course, that sounds like a long time to us, but I'm sure that wasn't. Who knows what time that took to get, what actual time that is. But yeah, there's a lot of conversation going on about 3i Atlas. Also, if I can interject here and say, what's also on my heart? People having access to affordable, nourishing, replenishing food and drink. Food assistance, food assistance and SNAP benefits being cut. Hunger, homelessness, and mass starvation. If I could directly speak to the federal government and any of these governments out here who want to take away food and starve people, take away food assistance, and it's not powerful, badass, or admirable to deny, deprive, withhold food and food assistance. Not caring, not giving a fuck that people won't have food to eat is not powerful, badass, admirable, or cool. So many people out here want to be a badass MFer. I'm not going to say the full word. I don't know if y'all listening to this with your kids around. I don't know where you're listening to this. So many people out here want to be a badass MFer. How are you a badass MFer cutting food assistance and or mass starving people? There's your 3i Atlas message. A message out of tons of messages being transmitted. How are you a badass MFer cutting food assistance and or mass starving people? I literally, see, let me stop. Let me bring it back. It's actually genuine kindness and care that is important, powerful, and iconic. Back to 3-1 Atlas, 3i Atlas, what it's being called. We can give the comet any name we want. I also wanted to ask Xenia about the imagery she works with. She has shared images of sea stars multiple times. Go check out her IG and website. And I wanted to know what sea stars symbolize to her. I recently became a PADI open water certified diver, and I saw a sea star for the first time. It was so cool. And I know that for many people out there, seeing sea stars is just like a regular, weekly, monthly experience or something. But for me, It was a big deal. My dive buddy and I, we saw a parrotfish, we saw a sea turtle, we saw the sea star, and that dive in particular was the dive where I was like, I have officially joined the underwater scuba diving world. And I'm so happy about that. But yeah, seeing that sea star, it really was a highlight. I also recently saw a brittle sea star for the first time, and brittle sea stars technically aren't sea stars, if I'm right, but a cousin of sea stars. And in the middle of this brittle sea star that I was looking at, um, in the middle of this small, teeny tiny creature is a clear, precise 5-point star. And I was just like, I laughed because I was just like, I just felt like it was like a wink or something. I'm like, come on, really? Is this why the brittle sea star is called a sea star? And the sea stars look like stars? I just, and I know that, that's old news for people, but some of us out here, some of us out here have never seen sea stars in person. So, um, yeah, I'm just like, this this 5-point star right here, this is too intentional. Too intentional. All right. Well, thanks so much for sticking with me until the end of this intro. Thanks so much for meeting us at the through line. I hope you enjoy episode 24 with Xenia Viray. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's a really sweet, sunny day here in Brooklyn. So I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, feeling excited for the fall.
Me too. I love sunshine. I love cloudy days and when it rains and thunderstorms, but can't beat a good sunny day, you know?
Yeah.
Um, well, as I told you before, I am super honored to be speaking with you. I feel like you have an enormous impact on me and other people. I love how you think and what you share, and it really does open up life for me. And there's been several guests who just shift my perspective in really interesting ways. And yeah, I feel like for all the listeners out there, people are going to really appreciate this, this time together. So first, my first question is, where did you grow up?
Well, thank you for having me and for your super generous words. I really am honored to be here too and to have made an impact in any way for you or anyone. So thank you for saying that. So I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I joke all the time that I grew up at the mall because I was born in the early 80s. So it was the height of mall culture in the 80s and 90s that I had my childhood in. And I grew up in a very sort of typical middle class suburban kind of environment. I was on a bunch of different sports teams, in a bunch of different clubs. I was in history club, I was in student council. I was always the kind of kid who wanted to try everything, and it was really cool because I got to stay in the same school from when I moved there in first grade all the way up to high school. So I really got to know people very well, and they got to know me. And I went to school with almost 2,000 kids in my school. So it was the kind of place where everybody could find someone that they had something in common with. And as far as the like middle class public schools go in the suburbs, we had like a more diverse population than some others. Um, but what was really beautiful was I lived in a multi-generation house with my grandmother, who we call Lola, and my aunt, uh, who we call Tita, and my parents. And actually, when people would immigrate from the Philippines and needed a place to stay, we would have cousins and aunties staying. So I was able to experience this really big contrast growing up of being surrounded by Filipino culture because I was born in the Philippines, and being surrounded by another language, which I was never taught to speak, but was around all the time, and still getting this almost movie like version of high school and adolescence in its sort of typical nature.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, I there's a lot there. At first, I love that you grew up in a multi-generational home. I feel like I got a chance to experience that over the last 2 or 3 years. Whenever I go live with my grandma, my aunt and my uncle and my sister and niece are there also. So yeah, it's interesting. Different generations in the same house. And when you were talking about growing up and being in high school and life being like a movie, I kind of thought of that Mean Girls scene where they're like, here are the jocks, here are the. I don't know if that's what you meant, but yeah, I was getting sort of the, I don't know, early 2000s, some kind of feel. Yeah, and I totally remember malls too. I definitely went to the mall when I was like a teenager or something, or preteen. I don't know if malls are that in right now, or if the death of the mall already happened. But yeah, I was just curious to know where you grew up. Um, what do you remember about yourself as a kid? What were you interested in as a kid? Like the toys, the games, dressing up? Do you remember anything about what you were interested in?
Yeah. So, first of all, like, I don't want to go too tangential into it, but it's funny that you saw this kind of Mean Girl scene in your head because I went from being a really shy kid into having this like really academic love of like wanting to excel in school into really kind of playing around with trying to be like friends with the quote popular people. And there was a point where I had this really rebellious stage when I was around 12 years old, and I was trying to be as weird as possible, like absolutely as weird as
Yeah.
possible. I wore oven mitts as gloves to school. I used to wear my grandma's pajamas to school. I would like, we'd be playing recorder in music class, and I would be like, try to get my friends to all hop on one foot while we played it, like just like really experimenting with different identities. And I actually feel like high school, and especially high school, and probably earlier, but especially high school, is the beginning of the programming of categorizing people and categorizing social niches and like trying to box us in to fit in these different archetypes that are largely proliferated through pop culture, because how would we even know these were a thing in a
Yes.
way, if we didn't see it there. And I know it's a bit what came first, the chicken or the egg, with like real life and pop culture. But if you're an immigrant kid and you're exposed to this, you do start to think like this is your pick of what you get to be. And I remembered very distinctly when I was like in second or third grade watching this show, Just the 10 of Us, which was like on TGI Fridays, like when you stayed home with got so excited for these like special TV shows on Friday nights. And there were all these girls in this family, and there was like one girl that was really smart, one sister that was really religious, one sister that was like really sexy but stupid. And I was super impressed upon by those pop culture images of like, you can be attractive, but if you want to do that, you're not going to get to be smart. And if you want to be attractive, this is what attractive looks like. And you can only pick one of the things. And smart girls, especially in the earlier part of the 90s and later part of the 80s, were never portrayed in many like dimensions, let alone there being a conversation about gender in general. So we really grew up in this kind of like linear pop culture space. And it was also at the time when you watched TV because that was what was on. So you were watching what everyone was watching at the same time. If you're lucky, you have cable. And when I was a kid, like, I remember actually really being mesmerized and hypnotized by TV and the archetypes of TV. But I don't know that was a tangent, but I feel like it was
Oh
like
no,
an
please keep going because
name.
I'm just like it's just so interesting how like what a hold those kind of images or archetypes have where like you're just watching a movie, right? And then all of a sudden you go to high school and you're like, "Oh, there's what I saw on in the movie."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting to think about how one influences the other and vice versa. But as a kid, what really stands out to me, and I've been thinking about this a lot today, is being in the house that I lived in New Jersey when I was very little. And we used to live in a very small house with a ton of people. And I would sit outside after the rain and I would play with these dandelions that were outside and split the stems in half and watch the way that they made a spiral in the water when you place them in a puddle. And I would do this for hours. And I would play a lot with like texture and material. So I remember I got really into playing with making a pile of baby powder and putting water on top of it and seeing like how the water would soak up the baby powder and make these different shapes and textures and how the water would kind of stay together. And I had this fascination with stuff that was really messy. So I wanted toys, but I could not keep them in good condition for the life of me because I wanted to cut all the Barbie's hair. I was like so rough on things. And I remember always asking my mom for paper and books when I was a kid. Like I loved getting any kind of paper to write on or to draw on or do anything with. And like for some reason, this story is coming to mind of when I was 5 or 4 and I had a goldfish that my dad won at the carnival. And I love this goldfish so much. I would bring it outside to sit with me in our yard in the bowl, but I wasn't allowed to leave the yard. So I could only play with my neighbors through the fence, my next door neighbors. So we would pass pieces of paper back and forth. But I remember this one day I had this like miniature soap dish and I would scoop this poor goldfish out and try to pet it and then put it back in
Oh.
and would do it like a lot. I mean, I was really little, but yeah, in general, I had this like intense fascination with animals and reading about animals. And my parents got me this thing called the Wildlife Treasury. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, and this subscription called Zoo Books. But the Wildlife Treasury is this big green box you would get. And then in the mail, every month or so, you get a packet of cards. And each card was about a different animal from all over the world. And you would alphabetize them and
Wow.
collect them. And I would read zoo books and those at Wildlife Treasury, like front to back. I just loved reading and I loved reading about animals.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, you as a kid, you sound like you were experimenting. You're like, huh, what happens if I do this? And finding a way to talk. Here, pass the paper. Oh my gosh. Wow. Did the goldfish have a name? Did you?
I don't remember. I don't remember at all. But as you're talking, I feel like I need to add that I also, my mom has six, and my mom has 6 siblings, and my dad has 4 siblings. So just on my mom's side alone, I have a ton of cousins. My mom's side's all here in the States, and my dad's side is all in the Philippines. But I grew up with my cousins so closely, like siblings, that I didn't know people hung out with people who weren't their cousins until second grade.
Wow.
And I told
Oh
my mom about it. I was like, did you know this happens? People see each other after school. It's so crazy. But that my cousins and I, a lot, we would make up our own games, and we would like take computer games that we were playing and turn them into in real life games that we would play in the basement, or we would take a TV show and make a musical about it and make a movie about it.
gosh.
So we're always trying to take
Oh my gosh.
consumption and turn it into creation.
I love that. I feel like that I'm like, that sounds like kids, that just sounds like, I'm sure during that time, it wasn't the social media and all the things, so you had to find a way to entertain yourself, which this brings me to my next question. Through your Instagram stories, I learned about the rainbow weavers, which
Mm.
brings so much light and joy into my life, witnessing that project. For Throughline listeners out there, the Rainbow Weavers is a kids summer camp on Cape Cod organized by someone named Alex, and it's just the best thing, like literally the best thing. And it's where children can explore their imagination and their creativity. And so, connecting this to what you just shared, it kind of, yeah, it continues on. Like, how would you describe your creative spirit when you were a kid?
Wow. Thank you for mentioning the Rainbow Weavers, by the way. The friend of mine who creates that is just a really magical person. As a kid, my creative spirit was all impulse, all fire. And what
Mhm.
I mean by that is I was really shy in school, but when I was at home, I was known for being loud. And when I would be dancing with my cousins, I would be dancing the hardest, or I would just be putting so much energy and fire into my little body, no matter what I was doing. And I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said experimenting, because I always wanted to see what would happen if we use something a little bit differently than the instructions said to use it. I always wanted to invent our own way.
Mm.
And I loved playing school and store, which is hilarious because I ended up having a store in my adult life and teaching workshops in my adult life. But I feel like, yeah, the best word to describe it is very fiery and very experimental.
Wow. Yeah, I was just curious because I feel like I'm always asking this question, and I'm like, it's okay, but just I'm always fascinated by how we are as kids and how that translates when we're adults. And I've said that in other episodes. Like, it blows my mind every time, like these parts of us that show up when we get older.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because that's been so top of mind for me for a couple of months now. And I think about how kids often can attain what's referred to as a flow state really organically, which is an ability to get lost in what we're doing in such an immersive and present way that we have so many ideas and so many solutions, and our sort of rest and digest system and our nervous system is so open and feels so safe to explore, and all our fight or flight system is dialed all the way down. And I was thinking a lot about how a lot of small kids just seem to be in that state and sort of feel shocked a little bit when you're taking them out of it, even if it's something so benign as saying like, oh hey, it's nap time, you can't do that anymore. It feels very shocking to the child system to be on the societal time structure.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Mm.
And I feel like we go back to these memories as kids because we're not really conditioned yet. We're not in the program yet. We sort of are just our essential selves. And so those memories are like compasses for what our spirit has always been.
I love that. Those memories as a compass. Yeah, because I definitely feel like I'm in some sort of trying to orient, and I over the last couple of months, I had a chance to spend time with my 9-year-old niece, um, which you're exactly right. Just playing, she'd be like in a flow state, and I would do some quote adult thing that would kind of disrupt the childhood happening. And so part of me, I'm like I just I'm hashtag adulting, but sometimes I don't realize how disruptive that can be. And I don't know if I'm saying that, if I'm articulating that the way I want to, but just that some things for kids are just normal. And like you're saying, if you're like, hey, you can't play all day or something, it's like, what? I can't ride my bike, you know?
Yeah, totally. Because I have noticed that it's something we do because we want to get them adjusted to what life will probably be like for them. So there is like a caretaking aspect to the reason why we are so disruptive to kids. But I just love seeing them be in that embodied state of presence and how creative it just naturally is.
Mhm. Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. And at one point, I like you, I like going in different directions. But if there was one direction that I solidly would choose, which I could still do, it would just be to immerse myself in, the worlds of children. It's full of magic and play and presence. Anyway, so I don't
Mhm.
know. I just wanted to tap into that because I noticed you've also been talking about, tending to your inner child, and then your friend is doing rainbow weavers. I'm just like, I'm just like, oh my God. It's so good. It really is. Um, and this question is, I don't know how I feel about this question, but you might have heard it. I've heard it. When you were a kid, what did you want to be what did you want to be when you were a kid, when you grew up?
So
Say that.
this is a complicated answer, but I remember specifically wanting to be the president, but I wasn't born in the state, so I found out I
Oh.
couldn't. And
Oh.
then I also wanted to be a pop star, like very badly. And I wanted to be a writer.
Wow.
And those were kind of the three things I wanted to do. I found a piece of paper from second grade. Well, really, a friend did and sent it to me from our class packet. And it was about how I wanted to clean up everything that was dirty, like the ocean, so that the people and the animals and the plants could be happier. So I think in the end, everything was sort of around that mission of wanting to make an environment that people could thrive and be healthy in.
Ah, I love that. I love that. So you wanted to be the president, you wanted to be a pop star, a writer, and you wanted to be part of the cleanup crew so people could be happy.
Mhm.
Beautiful. And then you grew up and you became an imagination healer and a frequency artist. And I'm sure much more. Um, which I love. I love how you combine those words of imagination healer and frequency artist. And I love to know from your perspective, like, what is the imagination?
Well, this is an interesting topic because I recently saw someone write that imagination is going to become more the job of AI, and our job is going to be more about presence. And I'm not here to agree or disagree with that statement. It certainly stopped me in my tracks when I read it. But I think this is a good moment to create a distinction between imagination and fantasy. I think that fantasy is something that we create that we know is not necessarily meant to be materialized and that we are using as a place of whimsy and sometimes escape. And I don't think that's always a bad thing, though certainly escapism can be problematic if we live in that state. But imagination to me is actually touching into the aspect of ourselves that isn't fully in the material world and touching the realm of ideas and thought forms that I think actually exist somewhere. So I feel like it's our spirit creeping into the world of the non-form or formlessness and playing with what's there. So a lot of times when I am imagining something, I feel like I'm actually interacting with some type of energy or idea that exists out there. And we're kind of saying, hey, do you want to make something together?
Hmm. Yes. Well, I appreciate you touching on like this being a moment of distinguishing between fantasy and imagination, because I think there can be a blurry line where if you're trying to encourage the use of our imaginations, and then maybe someone might say, um, I don't know, someone might say something that, what am I trying to say? Because I feel like, when you're, maybe you were imagining like a local river is can be cleaned. That's like not unrealistic. That's possible, but you're going into your imagination to dream up or ideate what could the life of this river be like. Whereas fantasy, um, that can also become, it's a whimsical place, but that can also be a place where um, you can get lost, or there can be distortions. They're both very interesting because it's like you're tapping into something that's, it goes to this question of, is it real, is it not real, and it just opens up a lot. And with AI, I love I want my imagination. I I can't imagine a world where we just like hand our imaginations to AI, but I have seen creative AI where it blows my mind and I'm like, this is incredible. So maybe we share our imaginative faculties with AI. But but yeah, you're touching on something really interesting. I love idea working with ideas and thought forms. I'm definitely an idea person. Um, oh, you said something else. You said something else. Is there anything else coming to you, maybe in response? I had
I mean,
something.
I feel like what I want to say is I feel like the imaginal realm is a real place where we are experiencing the part of us that's bigger than our bodies and less logical than our minds. And we're interacting with the world as that aspect of us, like that gigantic aspect of us. And that's why I feel like imagination is a real place. Like the realm is a real place where ideas exist. And I don't think it's just us creating, but I also think that perception is creative. So, what I mean by that is like, while I don't think we just think things up out of thin air, I think that every time we interact with something, we're always putting our fingerprint on it. So, there's not this feeling that like an idea exists like a perfectly formed book and it's just up to me to pluck it out of the cloud of ideas. I feel like we're co-creating with that realm all the time.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I do believe that there are ideas and frequencies that people are working with, and midwifing. I see all the time on Instagram. People are midwifing and grounding and anchoring ideas and all sorts of things to like materialize the idea or explore it, expand it. And being an imagination healer is really interesting to me. Well, first I want to say there's a part of me that could just really sit with what we're talking about. Because there's a part of me that's still ruminating on imagination and fantasy, but we're gonna move forward. So when did you start thinking about the imagination in terms of healing?
Well, I have to thank a lot of gifted psychics, mediums, healers, readers that I worked with from the course of 2015 up until present day, because I was really struggling to define my work. And there was a long time that I called myself a human design reader. And there was a moment where I was offering Reiki, and I was really having a hard time niching down into something other people could understand or identify, because I have always been multidisciplinary. I created my own major in college that was about being multidisciplinary. It has always felt to me like everything is connected. And art and science are my two kind of giant loves that I've been having a hard time trying to separate forever. They seem like the same thing to me. And when I was working with this one particular healer named Angela Angel, and yes, that is her real name, she was talking to me about how I have such a gigantic creative waterfall and how I don't need any help with inspiration, and how I basically, what she said was, when people come into the world with a healing energy, sometimes they're really focused on healing the past, and sometimes they're really focused on healing the future. And many of us are a blend, and both are so important. But what she could see in me was a desire to bring forward seeds of a future that's already healed.
Mhm.
So instead of trying to fix the present just to create something that was completely whole in and of itself. And the more I sat with what she said, the more I realized that what I've always endeavored to do is open people's minds to understand that a lot of our skepticism and rigidity is not only coming from outside programming, but it's not actually logical when you look at all the facts and data of what exists in the world and how it works, whether it's quantum science or whether it's us thinking about the fact that our planet exists at the exact right distance from the sun to have the life that we have here. There's a lot of magic in the world that we are taught to ignore, scoff at, be distracted from, and honestly, like be ungrateful for. And I think when people think about imagination, they associate it with children because that faculty is so dismissed and so undervalued and so undermined by the systems of hierarchy that we live in. So I realize that when I share with people, whether it's scientific facts or taking them on a meditation, what I'm trying to do is help them touch their imagination in a way that they can remember that it is a source of abundance and a creative life spring, and that it's not something to laugh at all.
Yes. Absolutely, because I don't know, while you were saying that, I just felt like a hunger. Because I did have a question that I didn't include about feeding the imagination. It just feels like, what if you lived a life where when you were a baby until now, your imagination was just celebrated and cultivated and, nourished and all the things that you just said where you actually turned toward your imagination and you were shown what if you were grateful for X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, what a life. But yeah, I think what you're saying is really important because it's also a strange dissonance because I love movies and film is so imaginative. Like I love the never ending story.
Mm.
Forgot when that movie was made, but it's so creative. And it's sometimes just a strange dissonance where it seems like in some spaces it's okay for the imagination to flow and be wild and just out there, but maybe in other spaces your imagination is there's more of an emphasis on shaping it and telling you what's right and wrong, and it can become very confusing. So I feel like you as an imagination healer, um, you're like one of the few people I know and one of the few spaces where you feel oriented toward the imagination. Otherwise, like with anything out in the world, you can get really confused and start spinning, you know?
Yeah, totally. I think it's really interesting too because, well, there's two thoughts I have. One is that imagination is something that connects to compassion because a lot of the times when people are having a hard time accepting, or actually not even getting to the acceptance part, even perceiving someone as they are, like really seeing them, which is something I notice has been normalized, is to sort of see past people in our daily lives. I feel like a lot of people have a really hard time putting themselves in an experience outside their lived experience, outside of a body that has the same emotional reactions as their body, etc. And I feel like imagination teaches us that we can build bridges to each other, even if we don't have the same exact experiences or identities or even values sometimes, that we could imagine being someone else or thinking differently. And I feel like our egos are so attached to trying to be right because the system we live in makes being right connected to safety and survival, and imagination is like not really concerned with that. It's like much more open to being a shape-shifty person. And I feel like when you're in an imaginative state, no one's ever trying to argue. It's more like, what can we do here? What's possible? What's your idea? What's my idea? And I feel like academia teaches us that things need to be in a contest that actually don't need to be in a contest.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely a different orientation because social media, that's like the opposite. It's the opposite on Instagram. Um, yeah. Well, it's so interesting. You might be picking up on my next couple of questions because I was gonna ask you. I noticed that you've been sharing a lot about the heart, and I wanted to know your thoughts about the connection between our hearts and our imaginations. And it sounded you were just speaking on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just realized that I said there were two things I was going to bring up and only brought up one. So I just want to acknowledge that that
Oh yeah, oh
happened.
yeah. Keep going.
Oh no, I just was like, oh, what was the other thing that I was meant to say about imagination? I feel like the heart is something really deep and metaphysical and esoteric that we are just beginning to understand. And I feel like a lot of us have been desensitized to the concept of love and the heart just because we've heard it so much and it's been hallmarked so much. And we've received a lot of priming about love again from pop culture that pressures us into thinking that love is just about romantic love, or that love is meant to feel or be a certain way. But when I think about love, I think about the force that animates the universe. And I can't remember where I first heard this, but this is certainly not my original thought. There's this idea that source or oneness was in the oneness and we were all connected. And it was because they wanted to learn or have a creative experiment that it split in two so it could be self-reflected, because it couldn't reflect itself or give or take from itself unless it split into two, so it could have that experience. And that split just kept happening more so that source could experience more different relationships with itself, but that people sort of forgot that we were all one consciousness to begin with. And so when I think about love, I think about source as in the field of existence, as in everything of in creation, as in the oneness that underlies all things. And I think of the heart as this tool or technology or energy center that allows us to tap into the form of intelligence that remembers that behind the facade of separation, there is this interconnectiveness, that we are all born of the same supernova, the same Big Bang. And I feel like the heart is also something that experiences time differently than the mind, because the mind is designed to actually slice things apart so that it can hold things discreetly and compare and understand and analyze. And again, like, I'm not making that wrong. I'm very analytical. I think it's really fun and I love it. But I think the heart deals with time in a very different way, because it's like a vortex where anything is possible at any time. So to me, the mind thinks about problems and solutions and how the problem becomes a solution and how many steps it takes to get there. Whereas the heart, I feel like, can create from scratch in this really efficient way, but it requires a sort of suspension of our disbelief and an openness that I don't think most of us are familiar with, because it's not really part of our culture.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Ah, oh my gosh, that was great because that clarified a lot. That clarified a lot for me, and that also jogged my memory. Like, speaking of memory, that's why I'm so interested in memory, because I do think there is something there. Actually never heard of that, like splitting, and then you split and you split, and now there's all these fractals, but now these fractals have forgotten they're part of a larger whole. And I'm personally interested in healing my own memory because I don't have such a great memory. I'm also trying to stop saying that story because I'm always saying I don't have a great memory. But I think from my own experiences of, quote, not having a great memory, I notice how, like, for example, this is just an example. This doesn't actually happen to me, but it's like if you look at yourself in the mirror and then you forget yourself and you're like, oh, who is that person? And then you remember, but then like 15 seconds later, or I don't know, 15 minutes later, then you forgot. And then it's like this constant, like, oh, who are you? Oh, and maybe it's not a loop like that, but there's like this spectrum of remembering, and for some people they remember more than other people that wholeness. But because there's a lot out there, like an actual, you know very hard things that make it hard to understand and realize that you're part of a whole. It's just great to get those reminders. And yeah, I've been listening to you talk your explorations of the mind and the heart. It's very interesting, and we're in this body that all of these things are happening. There was just a lot in there that I probably have to listen back to it. But I really encourage you to keep sharing about the heart because I think there's really something to that. And yeah, it makes you wonder, well, what happens to our hearts, or people's hearts? What's going on with our hearts? Well, in one of your IG videos, you talk about your desire. This is your words. You say your desire to go deeper into your body, imagination, teachings around the heart, and indigenous ways of knowing. And I'm like, this combination is everything. This combination, like, what? Because you say that a big part of your work is like synthesizing, and I can see that you're synthesizing information and what people are sharing. And this is a really great role. Oh my god, I feel my Scorpio coming. Scorpios can be very, like, don't want to share everything, but for me, when I'm listening to different voices out there, it's nice to have someone who synthesizes. So you go check out that person's channel and you hear the synthesis. There goes my lisp. So I was just wondering if you could expand more on this, because that combination, that it's like boom.
Well, it's really interesting because I do have to name that one of the people that I learned the most from, because they're so influential in my work, is the work of Georgia Jean, who channels these beings called the Circle of Light. And she's a trance channel. So she brings these other dimensional consciousnesses in through and they deliver messages. And I think that could be really far out for some people. But I remember the first time that I heard someone channel, maybe it was Lee Harris or somebody like that. I remember feeling like, oh my God, this is it. Like, this information makes sense to me. This feels like it's articulating how I really feel. The bigger part of me feels like it's ready to remember who they are. And I always think that when we're exposing ourselves to other people's frequencies, yes, we're hearing their ideas, but we're also sort of unlocking through our water bodies or through the electrical magnetic nature of who we are, frequencies and codes that are popping off. Like, what's resonating in us from what they're saying is because we also hold that in us too. And so I was really into these kind of conceptual esoteric explorations for a really long time. If you look at my astrology, at least from a tropical perspective, I'm all air and fire and a lot of Taurus. So there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of creating. But what's kind of more, I would say, what's not first nature for me to access is my feeling sensations, my body. And when I watch my mother, I understand why I'm not in my body, because my mother is someone who tirelessly works to provide for other people, who has been in situations where her health is threatened to an almost a near fatal degree. And she continues to work because she's like, if I don't do this, nobody can. And what's going to happen to my kids and what's going to happen to my family? And I started noticing how my mom does not notice how she's doing or take care of her body, and feel her imprinted on me around when I turned 40. And so I'm 42 now, but I didn't really feel that in my body until then. And I started realizing that in the history of people and all our lineages, because we've been in this survival sort of matrix for so long and are still in it in some ways, there is no room for us to feel grief and sadness when our life literally depends on us overriding our body signals to do something that's going to keep us safe, protect us from someone who's trying to oppress us, make us money, put food on the table, make other people like us so that we're not kicked out of the group, etc. And when you really feel into the body, it's never going to lie to you. And I was just thinking before this call, and I feel like I was feeling our conversation before we got in, because I had so many thoughts before, that the body is inconvenient. There is nothing about our body that's convenience coded. It moves at the pace that makes sense for it. And it is our vessel for interacting with the world. And so I had a thought a couple of weeks ago about how the first layer of control is control of the body, and how when your body is controlled by somebody outside of you, you're going to become self-controlling, because that's how you keep yourself safe and in line. So first comes the layer of like, oh my gosh, I control my body. I make myself work when I'm tired. I hold my pee when I have to go to the bathroom. I don't eat when I'm hungry. Okay, that's the first layer. And then you remember that before all the trauma occurred, there was a deep sentient connection to what we're referring to all as love or creation, and the earth's expression of that love, which is nature. So the body is just already psychically attuned to trees. It's already psychically attuned to the moon and the sun. And this is the memory of your most ancient animistic ancestors' indigenous ways. No matter who you are, there is an earth revering culture somewhere in your lineage, because that's where we began.
Snaps. That's right.
And I feel like when we get back into our bodies and we are in our hearts, so we can have compassion for all that stuff that's coming up that many generations of us weren't able to feel, and to forgive them for not having the circumstance where they could do that, and maybe even the ways it still shows up in us to suppress and repress our grief. That as we remember nature, I do actually think and it was a CYC, or it was a participant in a class that I was offering named Alyssa who said this. So I want to credit this because I remember that she said it. That's, I think, when we remember how to co-regulate with the earth. And I think that when we co-regulate with the earth, we are more unified, and then we're more in our hearts. And when we're more in our hearts, I think we're able to move collective timelines and personal timelines in a very different way than if we're just in our thinking mind or in a reactivity mode from survival.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, because well, my immediate thought is tracing, so it's like tracing our connection to the earth. If that's disrupted, then all these other it's like a domino effect. But yeah, that's why I'm going to ask you this later, but I did participate in your offering Create Your Cosmology, and each module is you could spend so much time in each module, and I'm spending a lot of time. I've been thinking a lot of the one with your about your nervous system, and I've thought about the body and my cosmology off and on, but I felt like what you just shared reminded me again of like the role of the body in existing and experiencing life, and that so much comes with the body, and when you're born there's like no manual. You're just in your body, and you've inherited a lot, and you're in an environment, and it's just, it's sort of like if you're, I don't know, you're learning how to walk and things like that. You're learning how to eat. um Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that about your mom, because I think maybe for a lot of people, we start recognizing things in ourselves or challenges we experience like when we get older. Like maybe when we're teenagers, we don't realize what our parents are going through, or what we're carrying that our parents are carrying.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I really feel for your mom too, that just that um the that desire to that desire, but also that the pressure of like, I need to take care of my family, and so this is what I'm doing, this is what I have to do to take care of my family. And that's, I'm sure, a reality for so many out there.
I feel like you're very psychic, Simone, because this
Oh.
is what I was actually meant to, when I was trying to remember what I wanted to say earlier. It's that I think that the bridge of creating a new world is where imagination meets a nervous system that can hold that imagination. And I feel like right now, so many of us have nervous systems that are just so completely out of whack because one, we're like the first generations to ever be introduced to this level of information at this pace ever
Mm-hmm.
in the
Mm-hmm.
history of humanity. And it will never happen again, this exact shift, So our biology is not really wired to synthesize this much information and all the emotions that come to us through the energy of our screens and what people are sharing with us. And I feel like there's something about getting together to co-regulate in a world that tries to separate us that is somehow the gateway to realizing what is in our imaginations.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel just really grateful that you brought up this concept of the nervous system, or you brought that back into the picture specifically, because I do feel like it is what we're all learning is that we are, yes, we are water. That's a big lesson. We're all learning about water and why it's important to know we're water, but we're also electric.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, our nervous system is an electrical being. So, understanding how that energy works, how that charge works, like, it could be really game changing for learning how to create the world.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Because I'm taking this engine class right now, and we're learning about electricity. and it made me think about in Create Your Cosmology, you shared a resource about our electrical bodies, and I've never thought of that so much. I've thought about our energy body, emotional body, never electric. So that's like a new terrain for me. And Yeah, electricity, you know? Um, well, this is so funny. My next segment of questions are connected to what you just said. I'm gonna pivot a little bit. Okay, so here we go. I feel like people live in completely different worlds. Like I literally believe this, and maybe you too. And especially during these times. Oh no, I said I feel like the these times especially, but probably always, is showing us that people have differing worldviews and are literally experiencing different realities. And I wonder if you can share your thoughts and experiences of crossing paths with people you consider from other worlds, because I think that's what's happening right now. You
Mm.
We're all here, but some people are in other places, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's this particular channeler named Bashar who's pretty famous on YouTube, but he says that like in every breath we're living on another world in another timeline, and every single choice we make is just taking our like that all time is happening at once, and our consciousness is stringing together something that feels like a linear story, but it's actually just hopping over onto the next moment, placing its consciousness on the timeline that it's choosing. And there's something about what you shared about like each of us living in different worlds that reminded me of that concept somehow. They seem very connected because I feel like how you conceptualize the world can very literally change your experience of the world so that you and someone else are sort of in the same neighborhood of experience, but for some reason, even though you're both in the same place at the same time witnessing something, you're having just completely different
Yes. Mhm.
memories and interactions of what's happening. And when I think about being around people from another world, it's kind of funny, but I actually think a lot about my relationship with my mom and how I'm the one from another world and how she's like constantly learning how to adapt to me. And by another world, what I mean is I have always kind of felt like a little bit foreign to this planet, and not to Earth itself, but to just like this time and place and the culture we're in. Like I never can fully, at least since the age of graduating college, I could never really buy into it. Before that, which is why I'm so grateful for my high school experience, I got the experience of living in the matrix of it. And I actually think that helps me do what I do now and be a really compassionate person. But my mother, she's from obviously another generation. She's born in the early 50s. She was raised in a country that's completely different than this country that we live in. And she and I experience life so differently that I have to take great care to translate everything I'm experiencing to her as best I can, because it's such a big goal of mine that my parents know me. I don't say understand. I do already believe that they love me, but I mean that I give them the opportunity to know me, and they don't need to get it, but I just want to give them that opportunity. So when I talk to my mom, I feel like I'm translating things into another language because I know that how she thinks is so different than me that I have to really work hard to make things legible to her that come from my brain. Like I would never talk to her the way I'm talking to you now. That would be so overwhelming to her.
Mhm.
And then the other thing, like, I don't know, can you tell me more what you mean about like meeting people from other worlds? Do you mean more what I'm talking about now, sort of human beings that are just living in different realities? Or do you mean people that are kind of actually sort of planted in some other kind of dimensional consciousness?
I
or
love
both?
that. Love that question. Well, love it. Well, originally I was thinking of um, exactly what you're sharing about, translating your experience with your mom, and I feel like that right there is something to really hone in on, like speaking another speaking another language or some kind of translation happening, and that being like some kind of skill that many people may need. I know some people out there may not want to do that, but if you're interested in like maybe having a relationship with someone who's in a different world, that could be something that you have to do. And I'm realizing now that I well, I have to do that too with my grandmother. I feel like, we're in different worlds, and I'm trying to make her understand me, and I get so frustrated. And I realize, if I want to, I can create like this communication pathway, but it will just be more work for me. But I meant both, because when I came up with that question, I was thinking a lot about, I've just been in a lot of situations where I'm around people who think completely different from me, and who mostly political views. And I'm like,
Mm,
we're in two different worlds here. And I feel like when we look out, especially with the uh, po- political events in the US, um, and around the world, that sounds like such a blanket, broad statement. But I'm sure a lot of people experience this. It's like people are in different worlds here. Like, and when I come across people where I feel like, wow, we're not in the same reality, um, it just makes, I guess I was thinking about harmony. I was thinking
mm,
about, because I have a question about unity consciousness here, and I'm just like, I
mm,
wonder about a lot of these things about like love and peace and harmony, when like, maybe I'm working with someone who's just has completely different views than me. They
mm.
don't mesh together. They're the opposite, And so I was just curious, because you really you offer different ways of looking at things, and I was just curious, in your own experience, like how have you um, engaged with people where you're like, I that's
Well, this question hits like very close to home because my family, my parents especially, are really far right Republicans. I wouldn't say super far right, but they're pretty what I would call indoctrinated by Fox News. And to be fair, I think there's indoctrination, liberal indoctrination too. Like indoctrination is
yes,
just sort of
yes.
this
Hmm.
is how it is. And I'm very suspicious of anything that's telling me to be outraged by another team and to focus on the other team and what the other team is doing instead of walk me forward towards solutions or hand me facts. So I'm pretty media skeptical when it comes to the big news channels right now. But this question brings up something that's also tied into everything we're talking about, which is I believe everything is consciousness. So everything mirrors consciousness, including technology. So I think technology shows us something about where our consciousness is at as humanity. And during the time of algorithms giving us news based on what we like to click on, so it's feeding us what we already agree on, we are living more and more in information bubbles and information silos where we're just being fed what affirms our biases. And I think that while there are maybe some benefits to that, it's really important to get out of our cultural and information silos. However, I have noticed that at times when I seek to do that, there are people who take me even following someone because I just want to know what this person is saying as my endorsement and condoning of what that person is doing. And I've been publicly called out on Instagram for following people that I just want to
Wow.
know what they're saying with all this assumption about what that means about me and my orientation to that person's belief, which is interesting, right? Because Now it's become taboo to even become curious about someone or something, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. And so I think that those bubbles in our technology, those algorithms, are mirroring the fact that we are each all creating more and more of our own reality and living energetically in our own bubble and living in our own world, and how it very much creates something outside of us that then mirrors like our own thoughts and perceptions outside of us. So I think I'm really, really not unique, but I'm energetically predisposed to having a lot of patience and skill around wanting to talk to people who I don't understand, because my family set me up for that. And my
Mhm.
astrology set me up for that. It
Mhm.
was like, this person's going to be relentless. And I give people the benefit of the doubt because it's my belief. I try not to be dogmatic about it, but I can't understand how anything in existence would not at some origin have some divinity in it. And I think of everyone as a child when I talk to them, and I think about all the programming that happened before that. And I try to get back to the place where I'm talking to the person, not the ideas, not the dogmas, and not the program, when I'm talking to the person. And Richie Reseda on Instagram posted a really amazing Instagram reel about this, where he's at a protest and there's somebody who's getting mad at all the people protesting in the name of Gaza. And he actually levels with the person and says, starts talking to him about, does he feel safe? And anyway, gets out of trying to prove him right or wrong or shouting at him, and just starts to interact with him like, how are you doing? Like, are you all right? And how the interaction and the communication totally shifts, because they're now talking about each other as people instead of thinking and kind of conceptualizing each other as a walking ideology.
Mhm. Yes. Oh my God. I hope whoever's listening out there, I hope you caught it. If you didn't, go back, rewind and listen to this part again, because yeah, I think this needs, thank you for just saying this. I want to say for your courage, but just saying this, because the curiosity being taboo, that's scary. That's scary.
Yes.
Um I mean, I definitely listen to conservative commentators that I don't agree with, but I want to know, what are you thinking? What are you sharing? And and I don't think, yeah, I'm sorry you got called out, but that actually makes sense to go and listen to, like, what are these other people saying? And yeah, I you really explained that very well, how we can just end up in our own bubbles, and how that just reinforces, our thinking, our beliefs, who we talk to, and it just can reinforce a lot. And social media is really powerful. Instagram is powerful. So if we can have more voices saying, hey, what if we get out of our information silos and bubbles? It's sort of not being powerless on Instagram, and being like, actually, we do have power here to shape. Um, um, there was something else that you said. Wait, I gotta get it. Darn. Um, maybe it'll come to me. But yeah, we need folks out here who feel comfortable, kind of going against the grain, because Instagram is a place where it's easy to, see that viral video, see the 5,000 comments, and within, I don't know, a minute, you've already been shaped or programmed in some way. And man, I forgot what I was gonna say, but that's okay.
uh,
Maybe it'll come back to me. But this also connects to this other question. When you are encountering so many worldviews and beliefs and perspectives and opinions and rabbit holes, it just like, it starts becoming like a hurricane of information. And I'm wondering how you specifically you, how do you anchor when, especially when you're interfacing with a lot of information and you're synthesizing, how do you anchor yourself? Because I imagine you as like you encounter information, maybe you check it and say, do I agree with this? But then you encounter something else that is in opposition to this, and it's constant information. How do you kind of stay anchored?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is really difficult because I do synthesize information really quickly, but I can overdo it because I love taking in new perspectives. And actually, this is kind of a newer thing for me, but I think there's two answers to this. The older thing that I've been doing for a while is I think I write and I reflect and I think about the things that feel contradictory and why they feel contradictory to me, because I feel like this kind of goes back to what our conversation was about kids. Like, okay, I'm taking in, now let me create. That's a way of synthesizing or metabolizing the energy I just took in. So when you write or journal about what's stuck with you, then you are distilling that information so it's a little bit smaller. And I think in the process, releasing some of the things that really weren't for you. So that's one thing. The thing that's a little bit newer for me, I think, has to do with the heart. And sometimes, especially this morning in meditation, I was thinking about how at the end of the day, I need to understand what's important and what's not important, and what's essential and what's non essential. And it's so crazy because I'm running Create Your Cosmology for the third time. And I was reading this book that I've been reading for almost a year and a half, maybe 2 years, even though I could have read this book in a week. It's so easy to read. It's called You Belong, A Call for Connection. It's by Sebene Selassie. I highly, highly recommend this book. And I'm also doing a food cleanse. So in the food cleanse, the journal prompt was, how does it feel when you're right? And how do you feel in your body when you make someone wrong? And then I'm reading Sebene's book, and the chapter that I happen to be on, because I'm savoring it, because I just want to take as long as possible to read it, is all about how being right is a form of defense when we don't feel safe. And I think sometimes we're learning because we're curious, and we're learning because we want to understand the world, and we want to be responsible citizens. And also, we want to be safe in the world. But the world that we live in now, there is a way in which information is weaponized to be used as a tool of safety so that we can avoid intimacy and rawness and uncertainty, and the fact that there are some things we're just never going to know, and that we have to live life anyway, which is what you were talking about when we first got on the call before we started recording, which is at some point you have to live your life. So what I try to remember is, are you living? What is the reason you want to learn this thing or know more about this thing? And yes, there's fascination, but sometimes we're just researching because we want to know everything about everything so we can make sure that we're doing all the right things and saying all the right things, so that no one's going to come for us and attack us,
Mhm.
including
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yep. Mhm. That's
So my anchor sometimes is like, oh yeah, what's the point of learning to live? And so what I do when I'm really overwhelmed with all the information is I'm like, you should probably go have dinner with a friend. You should probably watch a funny movie with your partner. You should probably take your cat on the deck and look at the sun, or like literally go smell the flowers, because you're doing all of that so you can feel safe to do this. So just go live.
Mhm. Yes. Oh my God, I'm getting that message so clear today. I know I told you that, but you're reflecting it back to me. And some of these messages I've been getting from the the universe, it's been so loud, like, please live your life. Please go and live your life. And that, like, yeah, it's like, can you imagine, I mean, we're all trying to do our best, but and can you imagine like you know, the time you could be going out to dinner or hanging out with your partner or petting your cat, but you're using that time to like overly research to feel safe, and how that can become a loop, which is it's totally fine to like learn, but exactly what you're saying, like at the end of the day, we're alive and breathing, and how can we live our lives, you know? Um, oh my gosh, I know that our time is winding up here. I had a few more questions here, but we'll see what we can get in these last moments. Um, what you've just shared, this brings me to compassion. And you've
Mm,
shared a lot of your thoughts on compassion. You're probably the only person that I pay attention to, like the only person in my orbit that is talking about compassion, where I'm like paying attention. And I can't say, honestly, I can't say I'm someone who understands or is completely open to compassion. And
mm,
I know I feel some resistance in my heart space many times, and I'm very grumbly about it. But actually, last fall, I did experience compassion with someone who I just felt like we were completely different people. It goes back to that we're from different worlds. But I felt compassion for this person because I was like, oh, you're the way you are because you grew up in your family and you learned all these things. And that
mm.
always stuck with me because it's like, I felt whatever I was feeling, I'm calling it compassion. There was also some sadness there. Um, and I'm just so curious, like, why are you such a big advocate for compassion?
Well, I do feel like it's important to name something that a friend of mine was distinguishing from me the other day, which is like when someone is actively harming you, that's maybe not the time to dig into like, why are they being the way they are, and to get really curious about the human that they are. And I do think that can become like a problem for us when we're kind of living in such a spiritual lens that we're doing things that are literally hurting us, like trying to find compassion for someone that's abusing us in some way. However, I feel like, you know, I feel like I was born into the family that set me up perfectly to develop certain skills. And the skill of compassion for me comes from the fact that I have seen people act in ways that I do not agree with at all. And when I look deeply into it, just like you said, I don't really feel like somebody who is trying to overpower other people, control other people, hurt other people has any access to the vast parts of themselves. Because if they did have an access to their spirit, like really did, they would easily understand that when they hurt someone else, they're hurting themselves. And also, I have noticed that so much abusive and bad behavior, whether it's emotional and verbal abuse or otherwise, comes from a disconnect from someone's own humanity, which often stems from history of being truly wounded and unseen and dehumanized, maybe in their own way, where their heart is so closed and their ability to see other people is shut off. And when I'm around somebody like that, I always feel worse for them than for me. Yeah, I will protect myself if they're trying to physically hurt me, but I've been in situations where people are definitely emotionally or verbally abusive. And even in those situations, and I'm not suggesting other people do this, I don't know why I'm like this, but I just am. I have found myself feeling worse for them and seeing that in that moment, for some reason, they're so threatened or so scared or so ill that they have lost all touch with what makes them human. And that is like the same thing that connects us to our life force. So when I advocate for compassion, it's just the patience or distance to understand that people don't really hurt other people unless they're on purpose or in egregious ways. I think we hurt each other by accident all the time. I think it's part of being human. But in these kind of egregiously harmful ways, unless they have been deeply programmed or are living inside a wound that makes them feel so small. So if you can almost find a space, like what I imagine is holding myself in a space where being that person being in their heart is easier for them. Sometimes that person can actually access a part of themselves that is different when they're with you. And I have witnessed this when I've been in a mediator position between two people in a conflict who are screaming at each other, and I talk to one and they'll say to me, oh, maybe I really wasn't being fair, or they'll own their part in it, or they'll see where the other person is coming from because I'm holding a space that's non-accusatory towards them and they're not feeling threatened as a person, so they can put their weapons down. Again, I don't know why I'm like this, so I'm not advocating for everyone to do this, but I have seen things shift completely when I hold that space for people.
Wow. Well, if it's already happening and it's okay with you, I love that you can hold that kind of space, you know, because maybe in some imaginal field, that doesn't happen, you know, and that it's something like that's not real, or, you know, but actually it's happening. It's already happened. Um, and so when you just have those moments, it gives you hope for, you know, it happening on the micro level to the macro level. Um, oh my gosh, you know, our time has winded down, but I had a few more questions, but I feel like this is a really great place to stop. Um, before I end, do you have any last thoughts on your heart? I know we're sort of we're ending now, everyone listening, but this has been such an amazing conversation. Do you have any last thoughts on your heart?
Yeah, there's a lot of new information about how the heart is a spiral or a vortex. And the person that I mentioned earlier, named Georgia Jean, that's impacted my work, one of the things she teaches is that our heart holds a blueprint. And this blueprint is way beyond what our mind can imagine. And that in order to activate our heart, there's two key things. One is to physically place our awareness in our heart space. So, literally shift our attention from the center of our heads down into our heart and see what shifts. But the other practice is so simple, and we will take whatever is charged. So, say that you're having an issue with someone and you're feeling irritated, you would say, you would place your focus in your heart and say, I love and accept the part of me that's irritation. And the reason we do that is she considers, or her guides consider, the heart this place of metabolism that can take energy from something that's charged and neutralize it and make it into energy for what your heart really wants to see in the world. So that's part of my own personal energy activism practice, is to take that which is charged and love and accept it in my heart to see if it can become fuel for new creativity. So I just wanted to share that.
Wow, I love that. Energy activism. That's another word combo I have not heard. Yes. Yes to energy activism. The energy activists out there who are like, yeah, that's me. Woo! Oh my gosh. Well, right now I'm like feeling a warm wind, you know, like this is what I'm feeling, some kind of warm wind that's blowing through. Um, Thank you so much for meeting me at the through line. I I don't really have I don't know what words to say except thank you. And that I please keep sharing, and I hope people out there keep supporting you. I know that it might sound, I don't know, it might not have a lot of weight, but I do think it's important to tell people, you know, like I think you're people are influenced, people are listening, and yeah, I just hope you keep sharing because um, it's needed, you know. And I'm just really taking everything in, and yeah, I just want to say thank you. And we didn't get to create your cosmology, but I did take that offering, and it was amazing. I still have access to it. I'm in Florida now, so I'm in another environment where this it's being activated in another
Mm,
place. So I was going to ask about that, but I just wanted to let you know that when I was taking that course, I was in Arizona and New Mexico, but now I'm here on the East Coast, so it's activating differently here.
mm.
So if you ever do it again, please check out Create Your Cosmology. All right.
Thank you, Simone. I have to say, I just really enjoy talking with you. And I feel like you have really such a beautiful, graceful, open presence and energy. And I really love being able to talk with you today. So thank you for having me.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Thank you.